Hello, I see we have a couple people on. Just waiting for a few more to join here. And let me adjust this. Here we go. All right, people joining. It's 9 o'clock. And you know what, everyone? I forgot my water. Hold on a minute. I will be right back. Okay, water in hand. Thanks for your patience. All right, everybody. Well, welcome to my YouTube channel. This is my Ask Me Anything session. I do this session once a month, and it's really meant as an opportunity for me to just make myself available. Allow people to ask questions, get input, etc. And I do this because I've had a fortunate time of being able to accomplish many of the aspirations I set for myself professionally as well as personally. And I want more people to be able to do that. So I set aside this time to give people a chance to just interact, ask questions, hopefully learn a little bit from each other so that everyone can share, right, our overall experiences and therefore hopefully take those to heart and enable each of us to do better as we execute day to day. So with that said, let me just jump into the questions. Okay, first, thank you for this session, Shellye. What can be done to advance to senior management as a Black woman in a Fortune 500 company? Well, what I will tell you is it's the same thing that can help everybody advance in their overall career, which is be intentional. It's really important if you have aspirations to actually take the time to set goals for yourself so that you can achieve those aspirations and then put a plan in place and execute the plan. And I know that sounds really straightforward, but honestly, there are three key questions I always ask myself. What is it I'm trying to do? What has to be true for me to get there? And in asking the question, what has to be true, in order to figure out what has to be true, you have to do the research, the homework, really understand what's the case. So if you're trying to, pardon me, allergies. If you're trying to advance into a Fortune 500, it's not just advance. Actually take the time to think about what job you actually want. What are you aspiring to? Whether that is a CTO or the chief marketing officer or CEO, whatever it happens to be specific. It's not just advance. And once you're specific, then you can actually go do the research. If you want to be a CTO, great. Go and look at what kinds of experiences people who are currently CTOs have had. What's their educational background? What kinds of groups do they belong to, right? Do the research. And once you understand that, then ask yourself, how do I make that true for me? So how do you get engaged in those organizations? How do you get the opportunity to take on some of the experiences that you've seen CTOs typically do, right? Et. And then once you do that, then you ask yourself, how do I make it true? Which, my apologies. How do I make that true? Which is all about the plan. What are the steps that you need to take? Now, when you build that plan, make sure you put timelines to it so that you can hold yourself accountable to actually achieving the plan that you put in place to achieve the overall goal. My book talks a lot about how to actually do this and do it in a way that works for you. So my number one advice, no matter what you're aspiring to, because there's several questions about how do I reach different levels, is you have to be intentional, do the homework to understand what it takes to get there, and then put a plan in place for yourself so that you can indeed build the right experiences and skills that are necessary. How does one get to serve on a board of directors? Actually, I have a couple questions on that. I have another one that says, I'm a CEO and I'm looking also at potentially being a board director at some point. So let me just spend a minute talking about board directors. First of all, I'll point everybody to a blog post on shellyearchambeau.com/blog. Posted it in the spring of 2019, which is basically a webinar on how to get on a public board. So there'll be a lot more detail there than I'll cover here. But it's just like anything else. If you want to be on a board of directors, then ask yourself, what do I want to do? I want to be on a board. What has to be true? Well, go look at what types of skills boards are looking for. The good news is it's really easy to do research on what skills and experiences boards look for. Many companies put it out, everything from consulting companies like McKinsey to recruiting firms like Spencer Stewart to even accounting firms. They do research and put out data. What skills are boards looking for? What are the background experience? What's average age? They do all kinds of things. So once you understand what boards are looking for, compare that to your resume. What have I done? And if there are areas that are gaps or things that you don't have, then work to actually figure out how do you get those kinds of experiences and how do you get that background so that you too can indeed serve on a board. Now remember, when companies are building boards, they are looking to add people who will add to their ability to successfully execute against the appropriate strategy for their particular company. The CEO looks for board members who can provide advice and counsel as well to them individually. So it's a job, just like any other job, which means you have to compete just like you compete for anything else. So the key is understand what skills and requirements boards look for, and then figure out how you can build those skills and experiences so when you're ready to compete for a CEO role, you're in better position to do that. But check out the blog post. There'll be more details there. The number one experience, though, I would tell you is get a P&L job, and ideally a P&L at scale. Because when you sit around a boardroom and CEOs themselves, they want to know that you've actually dealt with many of the issues that they're facing. So that's why that particular experience tends to be high in demand. How do I speak up in a work environment of extroverts? Well, first of all, you speak up the same way, which is to put your voice forward. If you say, how do I speak up in a world full of extroverts? I'm assuming the challenge is you feel you can't get your voice heard edgewise. If you're having trouble breaking in, that's different. If people are talking and you feel you can never actually break into the conversation, then you need to develop a couple of tools. One is conversations are happening. Do what you would do if you were trying to break into any conversation. You say, excuse me. Literally, you just say, excuse me. There's a point that I've been trying to make, and then make your point, right? Or as someone is just finishing up, it's learning to tag on. So if someone is just finishing up a comment, then immediately comment on their comment and then pivot to your point. So if someone just said, the sky is purple, right? You could say, I agree. I understand why you think the sky is purple, but let me tell you why I think the atmospheric conditions, blah, 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 right? You go on to your own point. By doing that, it gives you a way of segueing, right, into your particular topic. If you're still having trouble breaking in, then the other way to do it is to take help. A lot of times in meetings, there are standard meetings, standard staff meetings, standard group meetings, etc. Take help from an ally who's also in the meeting. Tell them, hey, listen, I'm having trouble breaking in and making my point. Here's the point I want to make, right, at the next meeting, etc. And sometimes what you can do is to get help, where somebody will actually call you out to say, Shellye, do you have a perspective on this point? I have done that in my career. When I first got on the public board, I was having trouble getting heard. And I actually asked one of the board members, I said, listen, when I make a point, would you mind reinforcing it if you agree with my point? Because I'm having trouble getting heard. I was just very specific. And you know what he did? Well, he only had to do it a few times before people started listening. So take help from others as well. Shellye, when I originally came to US to study, I was delighted to be able to stay and work in corporate America after my degree. To me, as an international student, that was a stretch goal. So I did not do much career planning beyond that point. I've been in the corporate world now for 20 years, and your book made me realize that I had a go with the flow approach to my career as opposed to a plan. What's your advice for someone like me who has realized in a later stage of their professional career that their existing approach with their careers may not be the best approach? Well, here's the good news. The good news is it's never too early to plan, and it's never too late to plan. So just because you're 20 years in doesn't mean you can't, from here on out, start being intentional. So ask yourself, what is it you aspire to do or to impact or to create? And then take the time to build a plan and a strategy to actually go do that. So I've seen people very late in life take on new career trajectories, take on new educational degrees, right? All kinds of things. So timing doesn't matter. It is never too late. The key is to be intentional about what you're doing. That's how you get the most impact for every step and everything that you do. And Unapologetically Ambitious talks all about how to be intentional with everything, professionally and personally. But the key is starting out with just setting a goal. And here, let me just talk about that for a minute too, because many people struggle. They're like, oh, I'm not sure exactly what I want to do. Well, listen, you don't have to pick the perfect thing. There are so many roles and jobs and ways to contribute out there. If you're not sure what you want to do, just pick something. Just pick something. Because then you have something forward that you are working towards. And if you, even as you get close and you decide, you know what, maybe this isn't what I want to do, at least what you've done during that time frame is you've built new skills, you built new experience, and you moved forward. So even if you decide to pivot sideways, you're still ahead of the game than where you were before. Too many people spend a lot of time kind of moving sideways because they're not sure what they want to do. If you're not sure, then honestly, it doesn't matter. Just pick something. But the key is pick something forward, start working toward it, start building skills, building experience, and then pivot if you need to pivot. Okay. All right, so the board question. What should a software engineer aspiring to be a CEO learn? The biggest thing to learn if you're sitting now as a software engineer and one day you want to be a CEO is how to lead. Leadership is the number one job of a CEO. So look for opportunities to lead. You don't have to be a manager even to start leading. You can lead teams. You can lead initiatives. You can lead in the nonprofit world. You can volunteer for an organization and work on leading a project, etc. You can volunteer. There's lots of ways to start learning how to lead. So leadership is really one of the key skills and experiences that you need. And as you start building that leadership muscle, then it'll give you opportunities to build a lot of other muscles, how to manage people, how to motivate people, right? How to understand and deliver, because now you'll get opportunities. If you've demonstrated leadership, you'll probably get opportunities to manage. Once you get opportunities to manage, then you'll get opportunities to understand how to delegate, how to effectively set priorities, right? How to deal with issues and conflicts, et cetera. So all those things will come. But I believe the first thing to focus on is leadership. Being a bootstrapped entrepreneur, I find myself often demotivated. How can I keep myself motivated most of the times? What I would tell you is if you aren't motivated and you're an entrepreneur, you may be in the wrong job. I hate to be the one to say it, but most entrepreneurs are self-motivated because you don't have a boss. You don't have people around you, right, that are motivating you. That is your job. So if what you're doing doesn't give you intrinsic motivation and excitement, et cetera, then I'd say self-assess. You know, not everybody's meant to be an entrepreneur. Not everybody's meant to be a software engineer. Not everybody's meant to be a CEO. I mean, so the key is understanding where do you thrive and what kinds of roles and opportunities really allow you to shine through, feel good about yourself, and feel motivated and inspired every day. So I'd do a little bit more self-reflection on whether or not you're actually in the right role. Let's see. What was a career setback that made you grow the most, and how did you deal with it? What did you learn from it? You know what? probably the most impactful failure that I had was early in my career. I was working for IBM. I was in sales, so I was selling computers and software, consulting, etc. And I had sold a big deal, I mean, really big deal, to Rite Aid Corporation to buy our point of sale systems and all of the back end computing system to support it. Well, Rite Aid had thousands of stores. So this was something that they were going to be spending tens of millions of dollars a year for like 5 years with IBM. As a result, it had made me a hero because I was bringing this huge deal. I was not only going to beat my number, but my boss was going to beat his number. It was impactful to the branch, to the region. Executives had flown out to meet with the customer and the CEO. I mean, this was all great, right? Until it wasn't. I got a call from the CEO and he met with me and said, Shellye, we've changed our minds. We've decided, since we're spending so much money on point of sale, instead of buying it from IBM, we'll just invest in a point of sale company. Ouch. Ouch. Really? So what this meant was I had to go back, pardon me, I had to go back and tell everyone at the office that this deal that everybody counted on, that everyone thought was going to happen, it's not happening. Let me tell you, it was the worst. Literally, several days of loss reviews and people coming through and why and what should we have done and blah, blah, blah. People acted like I was in mourning. They come and say, oh, Shellye, I heard, right? It's like, oh, so sorry. It's just terrible. Well, about the third day into all this, I come home from work and I'm in a hangdog, hanging head. I'm still feeling down and depressed and upset. And Scotty looks at me and says, Shellye, get over it. Oh, by the way, Scotty's my husband, or was my husband. He said, Shellye, get over it. The mourning period is over. It's been 3 days. You are the same person you were 4 days ago before you got the news. And I thought about it. And you know what? He was right. What I learned during that loss was that a failure is only I only become a failure if I don't move forward from a failure, if I don't learn from a failure. A failure is something that happens. But I only become identified with failure if I can't learn and move on from it. So I needed to learn and move on. He was right. I was absolutely the same person. This didn't change who I was, how I operated, how I executed, right? Stuff happens. The key is how you deal with it and move forward. It's not what actually happened. So that is something that helped me all through my career. Because trust me, we all have lots of failures, big and small. So being able to put it in context and separate it from myself, I'm not the failure, right? I just had a failure, was a really important lesson that I learned early that enabled me to take more risks later on in my career. What strategies do you use to help ensure you're being present in the moment and living your best life, both personally and professionally? I'll be candid with you. Being present in the moment hasn't always been easy. Definitely not. And I think what I've learned over time about being present in the moment is to take the time to be aware of my surroundings and to think through what I'm thankful for at the time. It's really easy to multitask, and trust me, my kids have called me on that many times they call it being in my phone, right? Mom, you're in your phone versus being there. And I'm sure others have experienced that too. So the good news is, if they call you on it, then you can acknowledge it, right? And go forward and say, okay, got it, right? So listen, be aware of your surroundings. Listen, be thankful. One of my friends, I thought, had a great practice. So I'm not going to take credit for this. She should take credit for this. But in her family, at dinner time, everybody would go around the table and say, what was the best thumbs up, positive thing that happened? And what was the worst thing, the thumbs down thing that happened? And everybody did that every day. And I thought, that's a really great idea. I wish I had thought of that when I was raising my kids. But what it does is it allows and calls for reflection. So being aware and present in the moment is really just realizing that right now, what's happening right now is important. And it's something we should be thankful for as we are planning for the future. But trust me, I'm still a work in progress on this one. What's the most unapologetically ambitious thing you've done that might make some others feel uncomfortable with? You know, gosh, bunch of things. Let me think. I remember at IBM, there was an initiative called mass customization. IBM was trying to figure out how do they provide solutions to customers that are individual, yet leverage elements that could be mass created, mass produced, if you will. So this was like the new theme at IBM. Well, my boss came to the team and kind of said, all right, we need to figure out what we're going to do in this whole mass customization arena. Now, there was no strategy. There was nothing. It was really just a concept and a term. So what did I do? I raised my hand. I said, I'll do it. I'll figure out our strategy. Now, did I have any idea what that meant? How I was going to do it? Any of that? No, I had no idea. This was a total flyer. I mean, one of those things where I have no clue. But you know what? I've learned in my career that taking risks leads to more opportunity. So I figured, all right, I don't know what it means, but you know what? Nobody else does either. So I'm going to go figure it out. And I'm just as smart as anybody else. So if other people have to figure it out, I can figure it out just as easily. So I said, fine. I said, I'll do it. And then I spent time, frankly, reaching out to so many people. Because here's the other thing I've learned in my career. Ask for help. Asking for help is a strength. It is not a weakness. If I had gone off to a closet, worked on a computer, done research and all this stuff individually, I totally wouldn't have been successful. Instead, I went out and talked to as many people as I could, people who were involved in the task force on mass customization. I asked who else should I talk to, who was engaged. I talked to everybody. I went and found somebody in the plant because they do actual creation and mass customization, hired somebody to bring in. Anyway, net, when I came back to the team and to my boss with, okay, here's a strategy and approach, etc., blown away. I totally exceeded expectations. Why? Expectations were low. They were low because nobody had done this before. So what I would tell you is take risks. Take risks as long as you're willing to do the work. Ask for help, right? And put yourself on the line. You'd be surprised. As a result of doing that, I got asked to be on a corporate task force where I was the junior person by like a couple of years. I was the only non-executive on this task force, for instance, and only because of the great work that I had done in trying to create a strategy for my team. So risk and opportunity, two sides of the same coin. Take risks because they will tend to open doors to more opportunity. Okay, next. How do you know you're ready? I assume that means for a promotion. How do you know you're ready for the next job or for the next promotion? The short answer is you don't. I mean, if you honestly feel you are absolutely ready, then you've probably waited too long to go after that next promotion or that next job. But seriously, I always looked at it as learning curve. Every job is a learning curve. You get a new job and you're starting at the bottom of the learning curve ladder, right? Because it's new. So you work to learn, move up that ladder, and you should be on a very high learning curve when you take on a new role. Well, the longer you have that role, the learning curve starts to flatten. So as that learning curve starts to flatten and you're not learning as much new, you're not feeling as uncomfortable, right, in your role as often, etc. That's one sign that you're ready for more challenge. 2, are you always under control? Meaning whatever you're responsible for, are things executing like they should, happening like they should, just kind of under control and happening? I would say that's also a sign. Are you constantly in a position where you can actually take on more, where you're asking what else you can do? How else can you be helpful, which means you have time? That's also a sign that you're ready for more challenge. And when you look up, do you think that you can actually do your boss's job, right? Your job around you. That's another sign that, you're ready. So the key is being ready doesn't mean that you know everything that needs to be known about that next role you're going to get. No, it just means that you have learned at a very high rate in the job that you currently have. You've demonstrated competence. You've actually shown that you can do the job in less time than you have because you're taking on more responsibility beyond the actual job itself. All of those things are signs that you're ready for the next thing. How do you identify the right team members? And how do you build a culture where there's honesty, hard work, and empathy? Coworker perceptions about your ability to be in a leadership role without the benefits. Oh, I think it's a different question. Okay, so let me stick with that. How do you identify the right team members, and how do you build a culture where there's honesty, hard work, and empathy? Building a team with the right team members is an ongoing effort. One of the things I like to say is you tend to hire people for what they know, meaning their resume, their experience, right, background. But you tend to fire them for who they are. It tends to be more around how they act or don't act, how they interact with others, right? So what I found is, yes, make sure that the resume ticks all the things that you need in terms of experience, but make sure you are spending just as much time during the interview process on who they are as a person. And that's the kind of person, right, that you want as part of your team. And in terms of building the culture, this is all around walking the talk. So if you're the one building the culture, you are the leader, then you've got to make sure if you want honesty as part of it, then you have to make sure you're being honest. And you might say, of course I'm being honest. No. When I say honest, I mean honest and candid, right? Because when people see you as the leader being honest and candid, then they'll know, oh, okay, this is all right. And if people are honest, even if what they say is, how should I say, painful to hear, right? Or negative or hard or whatever, you can't be jumping down people's throat for that. If you want an honest place, then you've got to accept it. So you've got to create space to ensure people feel comfortable doing that. If people start to be honest and then get penalized for it, you're not building the culture. So you have to walk the talk. Demonstrate what it is that you want. Talk about what you want in a culture. One of the things that I did as CEO is once a quarter, once we started to grow at scale, once a quarter I had brown bag lunches, virtual as well as physical, in which all the new hires for the quarter and I got on a call. And what did I talk about? I talked about the history of the company, so I understood where we came from, what we were about. I talked about culture, the culture we're trying to build, what's important to us. And then I always ended by telling them that they are cultural ambassadors and I'm counting on them. So if they see behavior that's not consistent with our culture, then they should be calling people on it too. This isn't my job. It's not just my company. It's our company and it's all of our jobs to make sure that the culture, right, is what we want it to be. So talk about culture. When giving awards and things, I tie things back to culture, right? So-and-so demonstrated outstanding teamwork, right? Or terrific innovation. Both were key parts of our overall culture. So you have to talk about it and make sure you're tying behaviors back to the culture that you are rewarding. What should you do if you feel behind in your career? That comes from a couple of years of exploring different career trajectories. So what this sounds like is you weren't quite sure what you wanted to do, so you tried a bunch of different things, and now you feel behind because you tended to move sideways. Not uncommon, but that's okay. Here's the good news, bad news. You have plenty of years to work, okay? Now that you've done that and tried different things, now go back to being intentional. It's the conversation we had before. Pick something. Pick what it is that you want to strive for and put a plan in place to go do it. And as I said, in Unapologetically Ambitious, it'll absolutely outline for you how to actually go do that. And then take help along the way, right? Get feedback from others. See if what you're doing makes sense, right? And if it fits against the overall trajectory that you were trying to create from yourself. It is never too late to actually keep moving towards your overall career. So definitely don't give up. Just set a target and start working toward it. How do you best steer a, quote, not now response to now is the time response with C-levels without crossing the lines? I'm assuming this has to do with promotion opportunities. So perhaps you're trying to go after promotion and you're being told, not now, right? Not now. Well, the key is to qualify. When somebody says not now, don't just leave it at that because you've learned nothing. What does not now mean? So when people say not now, that's when you use the opportunity to say, okay, can you explain to me why now is not the right time? Can you explain why I'm not Why you don't think I'm ready yet, right? What other experiences do I need to have? Or what results do I need to demonstrate? I mean, start pulling the thread on this to understand why it's not now. Because once you understand why it's not now, then you can put a plan in place to address it. And you qualify it. If they say, no, now's not the time, okay, why not? And they tell you, oh, because you haven't done X, Y, or Z, fine, then go do X, Y, and Z. And then come back and said, we had the conversation. You said I hadn't done X, Y, and Z. I've now done it. So now I'm ready. So now how do we go make this happen, right? So use it as an opportunity to qualify. Don't just take it at face value. How do you ask for an impactful work assignment? Okay, when you say assignment, that's just to be specific. You know, you don't walk into your boss and say, I'd like an impactful work assignment, because then it sounds like, okay, everything else is not impactful. You should know your company strategy. You should know what's actually important to your boss, what your boss's priorities are. So once you know what those priorities are, then you can go and ask to actually work on, be engaged in an assignment that's actually tied to one of the priorities, because by definition, that will be impactful. So the more specific you are, the easier it is to actually get a yes. Because when you walk in with a broad question, people have to think and decide. But if you've actually done the work, you know what the strategy is. So therefore, you know, right, what your boss's priorities are. Now you can try to align what you're doing with those priorities. So if one of the priorities is, I'm going to make it up, is to expand, right, their business in a certain region, then you can go and ask, because I would really like to be part of the team that's working on the strategy to expand our business in XYZ region. So be specific, and then talk about why you're actually the right person to do that. Because now you start to sell yourself, right? And again, make it easier for them to say yes versus to say no. How do you deal with the stress and demand of the job during your personal time? I'm a big believer in compartmentalizing, which means I literally vision a bucket. All right. So when I need to put something aside, you know, something's all on my brain, but now I need to shift gears into a different mode. I literally take whatever this is that's in my head. I visually open the lid of a bucket. I put it in the bucket and I put a lid on it. Now, that doesn't mean I never come back to it. I totally come back to my buckets, but I come back when I'm ready. But that mental image of doing that, right? And again, takes practice, enables me to now set that aside and now focus on what I need to focus on right now. So I use that from a priority standpoint, time management standpoint, but I also use it in terms of how I switch from, if you will, personal to work, the whole bit. So figure out what tool works for you, because if you have challenges of letting things that are working your brain, and if that prevents you from doing other things that you need to be doing or focusing on the things that you need to be focused on, then that's something you need to learn how to handle. And there's a lot of different techniques, but that visual is my technique. How do you succeed without having your manager's support? It's harder, right? It's always easier when you have your manager's support. But if you don't have your manager's support, number one, understand why. Try to understand why. You know, and these conversations are important to have. So let's say you don't have how to succeed if you don't have your manager's support. So let's say, I'm gonna make it up. Let's say you're currently a manager or something and you aspire to be a director and your manager isn't supportive. Okay, then you have the conversation and you say, you know, one day I aspire to be a director of engineering, but I get the sense that you actually don't think that's the right move for me. I'd like to understand why, right? That's one way to have it. If you're not sure if you have your manager's support, then ask it open-ended. One day I aspire to be a director of engineering. Do you think I have the potential? Right? Now, in doing both of these things, you have to be willing to be vulnerable, because you might hear something you don't like, right? That's okay. It's all learning, right? It's all learning. And trust me, learning by definition, you tend to be uncomfortable. because you're wading into waters that you don't know. It's okay to be uncomfortable. So either one of those approaches will help you qualify whether or not you have your boss's support. And if you don't, again, then understanding why not gives you the action plan to deal with it. If you actually never understand why not, and you just continue to work hard, you're not actually moving forward. So you have to be willing to be vulnerable. You have to be willing to ask the question. If it turns out, because not everybody's a great communicator, and if it turns out your boss just won't tell you, all right, then here's what I would tell you. You probably need to find a new boss. Or leverage mentors and advisors who are outside, right, of your particular role to help pull you out if your manager won't push you out. There's two ways to leave a job. One is your manager helps push you out, meaning they're promoting you and putting you forward for new opportunities. The other, if somebody taps you, right, and wants you for a particular role. So build your network beyond your manager and make sure that people see what you do and understand what you do so that they will pull you into new opportunities. How do you define what your goals, how did you define what your goals were, and how did you get to where you wanted to be? Okay, that's a very broad question. Number one, I would tell you, read Unapologetically Ambitious. that is basically the story. But the net was, I just picked the goal. I was 16 when I decided to be a CEO. Did I know exactly what that meant? No. How does a 16-year-old really know what being a CEO means? All the challenges and all the skills and all that. Do you know? No, you don't know all that. So literally, I just picked it. I picked it because a guidance counselor said running a business is like running a club. And I liked running clubs, National Honor Society, American Field Service, right? You named it, French Club. I did it. So I said, great, then I'll run a business. Now, once I picked it, I just started working toward it. I made that the North Star. And everything I did was optimized to improve my odds to make that happen. And that's all about putting plans in place, executing the plans, and being intentional every day so that things kept moving forward. Advice on building a tech company as an entrepreneur: fall in love with your market. Don't fall in love with your product. Too many entrepreneurs create something. It can be a service, it can be an actual product, and then they fall in love with it because they created it. Well, you know what? That's like falling in love with your baby, right? When you have a baby, no one can tell you your baby's ugly. You know your baby is perfect because you gave birth to this baby, right? And if people say, oh, I'm not sure about, are they a little jaundiced or let's see, oh, no, you're just not looking at it in the right light. You defend your baby, you nurture your baby, you try to attend to all of its needs. Well, the problem is if you treat your product like your baby, then you can't listen to the market because you know your baby's perfect. No. You want to fall in love with your market so that you are trying to care for and nurture your market so that you work to understand your market better than anybody else and you serve its needs better than anyone else. That's my biggest advice. Pick your market, fall in love with your market, and do everything you can to support it and nurture it, and then the rest of it will flow. Should I relocate my family and 5-year-old daughter for a great job in a racist area? Okay, well, been there, done that. So what I'll tell you is, there might be an area that you define as being racist. I have never found an environment in which everybody in the environment is racist. And I've lived in a lot of challenging areas. So was I always willing to move for opportunities that were great? The answer is yes. And did I move my family multiple times? The answer is yes. I've worked and lived in 18 different places. So my advice is, yes, focus on the opportunity. And when you get to where you're growing, I always say, and I just put a quote out up there on LinkedIn, I think last week, the week before, about bloom where you're planted, because not everybody, wherever you go, is the same. You will be able to find people that have your same values, have your same interests, and you'll be able to establish friends and make a network. I have in all kinds of challenging environments. So that's my advice. Okay. Within 2 years, what's the fastest way to accelerate my career trajectory from director to VP? All right. What I would tell you is broadly, if you want to be a VP and you're currently a director, number one, you've now set a goal. So now go look at the VPs that you're aspiring to be, whatever section of the business that's in, whether it's marketing, engineering, sales, etc. Look at what's made those people successful. Look at kind of roles they've had. Let people know what you want. Let people know you're aspiring to be a VP. Ask people for feedback. Again, make yourself vulnerable. Right? I aspire to be a VP of sales. I'm currently a director. What do you think have a potential? Do you think I'm on path to do that in a couple of years? Right? What do you need? What do you need to see? What skill sets, what experience, what do I need to demonstrate? Right? So you have to make yourself vulnerable and ask those questions. Make sure that you understand that at every level, the expectations of the next level are different. The higher you rise, the more important it is that you can actually delegate effectively and get work done through others. The more important it is that you actually help participate in creation of strategy, not just executing a strategy. The more important it is about the network that you're creating outside of the organization, right? It's your own personal brand and influence becomes more important the higher that you rise. So all of those things you need to take into account, but build a plan. So first, go find the information. Ask people, do you think I have the potential? Right? What do you need to see? What needs to be demonstrated? And build a plan to actually go demonstrate it, to prove it, to build the skill, get the experience, whatever it might be. And then go for it. So the fastest way is to be intentional and make sure that you are asking for feedback, specific feedback, every step of the way so that you can quickly course correct, improve, or add skills and experience as necessary. We'd love to introduce myself and get your thoughts and support of my business. The sweets. Okay, that's too broad a statement. If you're in chat and you're here, do me a favor and put a specific question in, and I'm happy to answer it. In the past, my ambition has been seen as a threat and negative trait. I no longer report to that manager, but what advice would you give someone who is advised to, quote, dial it back? For reference, I am 26 years old and my ambition has helped me reach the goals I've set for myself. As you can imagine, this was hard feedback to receive. All right, so first of all, the reason I titled my book Unapologetically Ambitious is because I think it's ridiculous, frankly, that some people are told they're ambitious and it's not a compliment. Now, let me define what ambition means to me, because I don't want you to take this out of context. To me, ambition just means that you have something that you are trying to achieve, are trying to create, or trying to impact in the future, and you are working toward it intentionally. To me, that's being ambitious. Being ambitious is not someone who steps on others, who takes credit for others' works, who moves forward with, take no prisoners. Those people are just rude, all right? There's nothing to do with ambition. So if somebody tells you you're ambitious and they don't mean it as a compliment, again, don't let it lie. Understand. Just ask, oh, can you help me understand what you mean by that? Because then you can find out, are you actually exhibiting behaviors that are rude? Or is it just they don't like how ambition looks on you, right? But either way, you need to know. So if you actually get feedback that maybe there's some behaviors you're exhibiting that aren't helpful, that's one thing. Address behaviors. Don't change the ambition, address the behaviors. But if they can't quite tell you why it's a problem, which I've had, so I've had it where people have told me I'm ambitious and it wasn't meant as a compliment. And I said, can you help me understand what you mean by that? And then they start flailing a little bit. Oh, well, I mean, you're just so aggressive. Oh, in what way? Can you give me an example so I can work on it? I mean, just start pulling the thread. Ask more and more and more questions. And one of two things will happen. One, you'll get some feedback that you can actually use. Or two, they'll start to realize that their statement to you was ridiculous. All right? So when people tell you you're ambitious, and by the way, this works for anything. If you get feedback that it just doesn't make sense to you and you don't understand, ask the next set of questions. Don't let those statements just lie. And again, ask very professional in a very learning, open way, right? Don't say, what do you mean by that? No. Make it easy for people to tell you, right? Help me understand. I want to improve, right? And then I find that people are more likely to actually be open and direct with you. By the way, if anyone on the listening has a question beyond what was said in advance, please just pop it into the chat. How do you stay in touch with people? How do you keep in touch with people that you get to know? So this is an interesting one. So I stay in touch a couple ways. One is when I do things, I tend to do things in groups. So back before COVID, when you could actually go to see a concert or a play or whatever, I invite a bunch of people to come with me. I'm going to see it anyway, so why not make it a group activity? Well, that does two things. The people that can come, wonderful, you get a chance to see them. But the people that can't come, but that you invited, know that you thought about them, right? So that's a way of staying in touch. I do a holiday letter every year that I send out to people just to keep in touch and let them know what's going on. If I see articles that I think might be interesting to certain people, I'll send it along. So I just try in terms of to keep people in mind, right? And make sure that I'm touching people periodically. All right, next one. How did you ensure you excelled in every role you were in? This is a great question. One of the most important questions that you can ask your boss when you take on a new role is, how do you define success? What does success look like in this role? And the reason you ask the question is I found that a job description tends to be a bit static. So there's a job description. Okay, you're now hired as a director of, finance and planning. Okay, great. I'm a director of finance and planning. And there's a set of roles of here's what you're responsible for. However, a lot of times bosses have their own view of what a successful employee is beyond just what those different roles are. So make sure you understand what their definition is so that you can then meet that expectation. Qualify, 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 qualify. Right? That's what I always do. I learned it in sales when I first started my career, and it's the best skill I learned. You want to understand. Sorry about all this coffee. You want to understand, what does success look like? How are they going to evaluate you? Right? What do they want to see from you? Separate from what's actually written in the job description. Once you understand that, then make sure that you are delivering on the job description as well as what their expectations are. And then check in. Do not wait for the annual review to find out how you're doing. Right? Check in. And I don't mean you have to ask for a formal review all the time, but just check in periodically to say, okay, it's been 4 or 5 months. Here are things that I've done. Am I on the right track? Especially as you're getting started, it's perfectly fine to ask if you're on the right track. Right? So qualify, qualify, qualify as you go through so that you don't get any surprises and so that you can course correct as soon as possible versus waiting for annual feedback, right, to course correct. And did I mention before, always get help? Realize that it's very rare that you'll get a job that nobody else has ever done before. So find those people that have done the job, whether it's in your company or in your industry or your geography, doesn't matter, and learn from them so that you can start out on first base instead of home plate. Strategies for customer acquisition. How do you determine when you are informed enough about your industry in order to begin to execute your plan? I feel as if there's always more to learn, and I wonder if I'm misapplying my energy in greater study as opposed to building and growing revenue. Yes, you probably are. Learning is an ongoing thing. You can't wait till you, quote, have learned everything and then execute, because you never will. The market is too dynamic. Customers are too dynamic. Technology is too dynamic. Much better to start, crawl, walk, run. Learn some, start some. Keep learning, modify. Learn some more, pivot. Learn some more. So it's an iterative circle, right? It is not just move, learn, and then execute. No, it is learn, execute, learn, execute, learn, execute, learn, execute, all the way up. Otherwise, you will miss the market, you'll miss the opportunity, and you just won't be fast enough. What's the best strategy or ways of transitioning from a technical contributor role to a manager leadership role when you have zero official management experience? It goes back to the leadership point I made before. You can start demonstrating leadership without the title. So start doing that, right? I mean, how can you demonstrate leadership? If you're an individual contributor, then you work for a manager who probably has a bunch of people that work for them. Look for opportunities to help coordinate the group, right? To lead the group, to do things proactively. Instead of waiting for your manager to step in, if there's something that needs to be done, you step in. Make sure you're actually educating yourself. Take some classes, read some books. There's so much information out there on how to be a good leader, what some leadership traits are, etc. So demonstrate that you're a leader, which will then give you the opportunity to be a manager. And number two, make sure people know you want to be a manager. You know, hope is not a strategy. You can't just sit there and say, oh gosh, I hope one day this happens. I hope one day this happens. No. Tell people, tell your boss, you know, one day, I know I've been an individual contributor for a long time, but I really want to manage people. And I want that opportunity. What do you need me to demonstrate to be able to give me that opportunity, right? Or just get feedback so that you can start to actually work on it. Okay, I'm 24 and a project engineer in supply chain management in the UK. Worth noting, I'm originally from Eastern Europe. I lived and studied in 6 different countries. I'm proud of what I've accomplished so far. I want to become a strong person like you and help young people discover their potential. My questions are, what are some of the lessons you learned from making mistakes in your 20s? And what are some of the attributes I should, it broke off, we see. All right. Question unfortunately was cut off. But bottom line is, biggest things I learned, I talked about 1, failing does not make you a failure. 2, everybody's learning on the job. Everybody's learning on the job. So learn on the job. Realize that your rate of learning will impact your career trajectory more than anything else. So be always constantly open to learning. Third thing I'd say is what I talked about before. A manager is just a title. You can be a leader long before you're a manager. So if you want to rise in organizations, demonstrate leadership. Leverage mentors. I talk in my book how to actually adopt mentors. So take a look at that if you don't know how to do that. And remember, asking for help, I've talked about this before, is a strength, it's not a weakness. So ask for help. Nobody accomplishes anything of significance all by themselves. So why do you think you're going to be the first person on the planet to do it? What are your top 3 career advancements techniques that you find people tend to forget? You've got to nail the job you've got before you excel to the next job. So make sure that you are absolutely nailing your job. If you're constantly focused on the next thing and you're not quite nailing your job, it's going to make it hard. And at some point, you're going to hit a ceiling. 2, you have to let people know what you want. They cannot read your mind. And 3 is be organized. You want to make sure that you're the person that when you get an action item or when you say you're going to do something, you actually do it. You know, the consistency of execution is really important to people and people that will want to hire you. Your story inspires me a lot. I'm a new immigrant Asian woman, and I feel frustrated in networking because there are a lot of differences between me and the White Boys Club. While most people are nice, I can feel some people's unfriendly attitude. How do you network in such an environment? Just remember, everybody's an individual. We tend to group people, together because that's how we think about it, but everybody's an individual. So the way you network, and by the way, networking is not how many business cards you have. Network are how many people that you have real relationships with. How many people can you call that will actually do something for you when it's not convenient for them? So you have to build relationships, and you do that one person at a time. And everybody's an individual. So don't make assumptions when you see groups and how people are interacting. Target somebody, target someone, look in the group, target someone that you think you might have something in common with or that you think you can develop a relationship with and start to work on a relationship one at a time. And then once you have a relationship with one person, then it tends to be easier to make the next, because you can either leverage their network, right? Because if you've established a relationship with them, they have relationships with other people. You'll leverage the confidence of having that one to be able to start the next one. But the key is just start with your first. Just start with your first and then build from there. Okay. Any questions in the chat that I missed? No, I don't see it. Oh, good. I'm glad. Thanks very much for the feedback. Well, listen, I want to thank everybody for tuning in today to my Ask Me Anything. Subscribe to my channel. I'll do this again next month, and send your questions in, and you can always ask them live in the chat. But here's me telling you, be bold and go after your aspirations professionally and personally. You can achieve them if you are intentional and willing to make the choices and trade-offs required. All right. Thanks, everybody. Have a great day.